Hi everyone, in this video I'll be talking about my experience in writing the GRE exam. I wrote the GRE exam a couple of years ago. What is the GRE exam? The GRE exam is a test which you have to write if you wish to pursue higher studies in any foreign university. So the GRE exam comprises of three main parts. First, we have the quantitative reasoning part, and then we have the verbal reasoning, and we have the AWA. Now what is the AWA? AWA stands for Analytical Writing Assessment. First, let's look at the two major parts, quantitative reasoning and verbal reasoning. Now quantitative reasoning comprises of 170 marks. Out of these 170 marks, 130 marks will be allotted to you by default. So you have to work for the rest of the 40 marks. Now the same marking system also applies for verbal reasoning. It comprises of 170 marks. Out of that, 130 is allotted to you by default. Now quantitative reasoning and verbal reasoning together will amount to 340 marks. So you will be writing the GRE exam out of 340 marks. Now let's look at AWA. AWA comprises of 5 points. So you could get 1 point, 2 point, or anywhere within the range of 1 to 5. So these 5 points won't be included in the 340 marks, it's separate. So now let's look at what happens on the day of the exam. On the day of the exam, you'll have a total of 6 sections which goes on for 4 hours. Now after 3 sections, you'll get a 10-minute break. The first section always comprises of AWA. So AWA comprises of 2 subsections. Each subsection consists of 30 minutes. So the first one will be issue writing, and then you'll have argumentative essay. So this is for the first section. Now let's look at the rest of the 5 sections. Out of these 5 sections, 2 sections will be quantitative reasoning and 2 sections will be verbal reasoning. Now quantitative reasoning consists of 20 questions and it goes on for 35 minutes. Verbal reasoning comprises of 20 questions, but it goes on only for 30 minutes. So we have 4 sections now, 2 quantitative and 2 verbal. What about the 5th section? Now this section is called as unscored section. In this section, your performance will not actually be evaluated. In other words, this section is a dummy section. Now what does this mean? In this section, your performance does not affect the actual score. Instead, this section exists purely to determine the standard of questions for the future batches of GRE. So you might think that you don't have to worry about this section, but the problem is you wouldn't know out of these 5 when this unscored section actually appears. It could appear as the first section or the second or the last. So you wouldn't know that. So your performance must be on par for all of these 5 sections. So this is it for the day of the examination. Another thing that you have to know about GRE examination is that its difficulty is not constant. It's dependent on your performance. So in the first section, if your performance is really good, then the next section's difficulty will increase a little. On the other hand, if your performance for the first section is not so good, then the difficulty level will decrease for the progressive sections. So this happens separately for aptitude, quantitative aptitude, and for verbal reasoning. Now I'll be talking about how you have to prepare for the GRE examination. Now how I prepared was, I went to a training institute for 4 months, and then my semesters came, so I took a break of 2 months, and then I pursued my GRE preparation again. Now I will not advise this way to anyone because I made a mistake. During the first 4 months of vigorous learning for GRE, my scores progressively increased because I take those evaluative assessments and my scores increase. But after taking the break of 2 months, my score went back to square one. So my suggestion is you take the preparation in one go and then you go straight for the exam. In the heat of the preparation, attend the exam and finish it off. So this is my utmost advice to you. Please follow it. Now I'll be talking about the material which I used for the preparation of GRE. Now in verbal reasoning, we have vocabulary. Now most of us are not so strong in vocabulary because obviously English is not a native language. So I use 3 things for my vocabulary. I use the word list. It's called as Barron's word list. That's the most recommended word list. And then we have flashcards, and I use the particular book for the vocabulary. I'll be showing you the word list. So this is Barron's GRE book. There are many editions in this. And we have a few pages of word list. Now the word list comprises of 3000 words which are the most frequently asked words in the GRE examination. But this does not mean that the GRE exam will only ask from these 3000 words. It does not mean that. It just means that these are frequently asked words over the past few years. So you might think that it's easy to memorize 3000 words, but it's really not. Because you might remember, you might be familiar with the word, but you won't know the meaning of it. You won't be able to recall the context in which it's used. So my advice is go through at least 5 to 10 words every single day. And then go through it a few times, not just once. It's not enough to remember. Next, I'll be showing you the flashcards which I use. So these are the flashcards which I use. Now these flashcards are really fun and they're very convenient because they have the meaning, the word in the front, and in the back they have the word, they have the meaning, an example, antonyms and synonyms. So it really gets into your mind, it gets etched in your mind. And they also come in different colors, so you can have it as a fun activity. I used to learn it in the bus, in my college, everywhere. Next, I use a particular book. I would not say that this book is compulsory because this book tends to go into the roots of each word. It talks about the origin of a word. So if you really want to improve in your vocabulary, you can use this book. If you want in-depth learning, use this book. This book is called as Word Power Made Easy and the author is Norman Lewis. I think you can get it in any bookstore, Amazon, anywhere. So these are the materials which I use for my verbal reasoning vocabulary part. But bear in mind that vocabulary part is only a small part of verbal reasoning. Verbal reasoning also comprises of critical reasoning and comprehensive skills. So you have to go through a lot of passages to brush up your critical reasoning skills. Next, let's talk about quantitative reasoning. Now this section is kind of complicated because it comprises of so many different topics. It has statistics, geometry, arithmetic numbers, probability, and you have to master all of these topics. Now my advice would be that do not just go through assessment papers with all of these topics together. First, give individual attention to each of these topics. How I learned was I spent 1 week dedicated just for statistics and another week for geometry. If statistics is a weak point, then spend 2 weeks for that. Become thorough in it. And while you're practicing in statistics, take note of all the mistakes which you make in it. For example, take a spreadsheet and write down the areas in which you make mistakes. This way, you will be able to prevent the same mistakes in your exam. So this is the systematic way which I use to learn for my GRE, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comment section below. And I would like to wish you all good luck for your exams. Thank you.